Oh, well, here we be. Make yourself to home. Oh, good. The kettle's on, and there's stew on the hob. Make us some tea, would you, darling? Oh, caddy's on the mantel with the pot, nuggets and spoons on yon shelf with the tankards and all. Nothing like a cup of tea to set a body up. Oh, I'll get somewhat for myself after I repack me needments. Oh, babbies come at all odd times, and well, it wouldn't do to be caught without having me pack ready to hoist and run. Thank you kindly for coming to the Lion Inn, Mrs. Howard. All right then, Brady. And I'm Annie. So good to have another woman living on the river. Oh, it was an easy delivery, Mrs. Benson, and oh, a fine boy finally. Mayhap that husband of hers will finally give the poor woman a rest now that he's got a son. 8 babbies in 11 years is too much for any woman, and her losing the 3 boys already. But I mustn't gossip. Mr. McFarlane says it's me one abiding sin. Daft man hasn't been paying attention. Oh, what's in the midwife's pack? Well, let's see, I've got squaw root, Jesuit bark, black pepper, and raspberry to bring on the labor, white willow and me homebrew honey mead for pain, angelica, basil, clary sage, and feverfew to expel the afterbirth, and then a tonic for after to cleanse the blood, balance the humors, and bring on the milk. That's got rose hips, sage, wormwood, raspberry leaves, valerian root, and comfrey. I mix it up ahead so that I can leave it with the mother. Oh, then bear fat oil infused with balsam and juniper to rub on her back and belly and, well, ease the passage for the little one. Then just odds and bobs, spoons, candles. Oh, it's not. It's just a pretty. It's Russian, I'm told, not that I'd know the difference. It's got a wee painting of a pretty woman setting and spinning. Oh, it's not so much a gift as a payment of sorts. Of course, there's a story behind everything. This one's the story about how I became a midwife and started catching the babies. Well, on your head be it. You'll find I love telling stories, especially if they're about me. Well, first, I guess you need to know a bit about me. I was born in the Canebrakes in the Kentucky Territory in 1754, I think. Me dad was an Irishman, trapper and trader, and me mom's Cherokee, midwife and herbalist. What folks used to call a yard woman, yards being herbs. Yes, I'm half Cherokee and I know I don't look it. It must skip a generation because you should see me 4 children. They're the spitting image of me mother's people, especially me oldest boy. Oh, he looks just like his granda walks long. So, Seed Salagi. That means Cherokee I am. Aga Ali diuehi anadadishki dachwadoya. Old hands remember my name is. Yes, I speak me mother tongue as well as English, which I learned from me da. Folks say I have a bit of the sound of him, but I don't hear it. Oh, now look, you got me wandering. Let's see. We was living on the Missouri at that time, and I was 14 years old. Now, I was 11 when me moon blood started to come every month, and to the Cherokee that meant I was a woman. And it was time I learned what a woman needed to know. So Mom started teaching me about the yarbs and how to prepare them, and started taking me with her to catch the babbies. Oh, I loved watching Mom work around the birth mother. She'd walk her around singing to distract her from her fear and her pain. She'd sing birthing songs while she rubbed oil onto the mother's back, letting the rhythm of the rubbing move the song along. Una dea ho, una dea ho, una deo, ho ho ho, hey ya ho, ya, ya. Ah, she was in constant movement, lifting and squatting and walking and bending, and then when the time came, she'd squat down in front of the mother and hold out her hands and catch the baby as it pushed itself free. One night I was watching Mom, and I thought to myself, this is the way it's always been done, with these actions and these movements. And for one moment I thought I saw, stretching out behind her, generations of women performing this same service with these actions and these movements. And all of their movements rippled out behind her, going all the way back to Bible times and rolling forward to meet me. And I knew I'd soon be taking my place in the dance. Well, that's how my heart sees it, as a grand midwife's dance. So, after 3 years of working with Mom, I was learning right and proper, but I still hadn't attended a birthing on my own. But one full day, me dad and me brothers was off running the trap lines, and Mom had gone to nurse a neighbour who had the canker throat. But she left me at home to tend to me baby's sister, who had the quinsy and was feverish and cranky. I had a big fire started in the yard, big smoky fire, because I was cutting deer meat up to smoke it for the winter. Do you know the saying, smoke follows beauty? Well, if it's true, I was the most beautiful woman in the territory that day. Smoke from that blasted fire followed me everywhere I went in the yard, no matter where I put me set and stomp, getting in me eyes and making them run water and choking me with every breath. And me baby sister was whining at me from the cabin because she wanted me to read to her, and she wanted a drink, and she wanted Mom, and she wanted up, and on and on and on. And I was working myself into a real fit of feeling put upon when I heard it crashing in the brush out behind the cabin. Now, thinking it was me Dan brothers, I went to go look and saw a little tiny girl pushing her way through the wild rose brambles. And she's blubbering and crying, and her clothes is all tore up and filthy, and right on her heels comes a woman all wrapped up in shawls and in no better shape than the little girl. And the woman comes up the side of our cabin and looks around till she sees me and me smoky fire, and she turns to the little girl and says, "Run to the fire, Lottie." And she just falls over. And Lottie runs up to the fire and stands there shivering and looking around like she expects something to jump out at her at any moment. Well, I went to get the woman setting up. And she was bone tired, hungry, and very pregnant. As I got her into the house, she told me that she was Mrs. Hampton, and she and her family lived 9 miles upriver at a little collection of cabins round a trading post. Now, her man was off delivering lumber, but she wasn't due for a month. Now, I had heard about Mrs. Hampton. Her man had fetched her here to her new home from Charlestown just 4 months back. She was his second wife and stepmother to Lottie. Dorcas Hampton had been the belle of Charlestown society, and God never made a woman less prepared to live in this rough place. There's only 2 other women in her little community, and they had work of their own to do. Her sole helping company was Lottie, who was 6 years old. Mrs. Hampton had been watching out the door, looking for her husband, when she saw a little band of Indians come out the woods and start up towards their place. Well, she panicked, grabbed Lottie by the hand and took off out the door to dead run. Well, in no time at all, they were totally lost, wandered around for hours until dark, and then wrapped up in her shawls and slept rough under a tree. Next morning, they stumbled onto the river, and she remembered hearing that the midwife was 9 miles downriver. So they followed the river till she saw me big smoky fire, and they cut through the brush, and here they were. Well, I got them cleaned up and fed, and put Lottie to bed with me sister, where they fell to playing with me sister's rag babbies. And of course, Mrs. Hampton went into labor. Nothing like a 9-mile hike and a night under a tree to bring on contractions. I put the kettle on, and I got clean cloth strips out of the linen press, and I brewed up some willow tea, and I walked her. Come on, Mom. And we walked. Yes, Mrs., I know you're frightened, but I promise that we'll get through this just fine. And we walked. Oh, I know you're hurting, but your water will break soon, and then things will be moving along a lot faster. And we walked. Yes, Mom, I know, but I promise me Mom will be coming home any time now. And suddenly she doubled over and grabbed the frame of the bed with both hands and groaned, "It's coming." Well, I got her down on the birthing stool, and I squatted down in front of her, and I showed her how to hook her arms under her knees and pull back hard. And between her legs I saw blood and slime and the top of a tiny little head. And I held my hands out and cupped that little head, and on her next push, Mrs. Have a deep breath, and push. Push now hard. Deep breath, push. Oh, and on her next push, I got a baby boy. The rest is best told swiftly, because it still rankles my heart. I cleaned him up, and I saw to her comfort, "Here you go, Mrs." And I was putting bread on to raise when me da and me brothers got home. And one of the boys was sent upriver to see if her husband was home, or to leave word where she was if he wasn't. And about then, my mom got back, and she showed no surprise at her unexpected guest. She checked to see that mother and son were healthy, and gave me a nod and a smile. Oh. And 2 days later, Mr. Hampton arrived. He rode into our yard and stopped dead on seeing me Cherokee mother. Me da went out to greet him, and I heard them talking low and fast. And then Mr. Hampton pushed past me da and came up into the cabin. And Mrs. Hampton looks up all hesitant like and holds the baby out for him to see, but without even a look at his son, he starts snapping questions at her. What happened? Why'd she run off? Well, she's trying to explain about the Indians, and he tells her to stop whining. He abuses her for running off and leaving their cabin open to who knows what mischief. He told her that her childish behavior had caused his son to be delivered by a dirty half-breed. As Mrs. Hampton was bundling up Lottie and the baby, she caught my hand and pressed something into it. They left. We never saw them again. Now, we heard tell that she took the children and went back east the following spring. Seems he was killed by a tree he was trying to cut down. Got caught on a snag, twisted sideways, and crushed him. Real pity, that. And of course, this is what she pressed into me hand. Me first midwife's fee. Since I don't wear it, Mr. McFarlane thinks I should sell it, but I can't. I keep it for the memories and the lessons. And one day soon I'll pass it and the story along to the one who I'm teaching to catch the babies. He was born November's child, born into a cabin small with hearth and quilt and cedar walls and a midwife's dance. And I would love you every day. Every night we'll kiss and play. If with me you'll fondly stray over the hills and far away. Oh, Lena, please, darling. Granddaughter, please calm yourself. Cry yourself out and try to get some sleep. Don't worry about the chores. They'll still be here. The only certainty in life, chores. Oh, ye gods, Bridie. What is this world coming to? And what kind of folk are we that this could happen right in our midst and we miss it? Fetch that jug up from behind the wood box, would you? You look like I feel. And we could both use a medicinal tot rum in our tea. Don't bother looking all prissy and innocent with me, Mistress Howard. I know all about that jug and how himself got it. Your part in that smuggling operation did not go unnoticed. I've got nothing against spirits. Lord knows I use enough making tinctures and cordials for sick folk. I don't even object to spirits at a wedding or a gathering. What I dislike is falling down puking stupid drunken fools. There's never a need for such carrying on as I can see. But it does buck a body up and take the shakes away. And makes it easier to talk about hard things. Oh, I know. It doesn't make any sense seemingly coming out of a blue sky. But actually the story goes back about 11 months. Well, from what I've been able to get from Lena and the other girls, I think I puzzled it together. Well, it's the oldest story in the book. A girl, a boy, and a baby on the way. It's just that simple. No, you're right, that's not simple, is it? Ardelia met Tom Race at the market. They was struck stupid and calf-eyed from the start. No, and her folks would never want her keeping company with a dirt poor millwright's apprentice. They snooked and sneaked around with her girlfriends, keeping watch for them. She misses her courses in the middle of August and fears she's in the family way. If only she'd come to me. Well, she wouldn't be the first or last woman in this area who come to me for a cup of Lilith's draft to get herself or her family out of a bad situation. But she never told her mam. Well, Ardelia's family would never have tolerated even a suggestion of such a thing, and she never had the nerve to come to me on her own. You know, it fashes me that she was in such terror of her own family. And if I had to make a guess, I'd point me every available finger at that vicious brand of hellfire and punishment religion her da preaches. Oh, and I'd like to know who he thinks he is anyway, telling me my business. Self-righteous prig, wagging his finger in my face and telling me I'm going to hell. I have never understood why the men in the white community feel they have a right to interfere in these things anyway. Well, the Cherokee know it's not good for a woman to have 8, 9, 10 babies in a row the way the white women do, with hardly any time in between to heal. They know it breaks down a woman's strength and, puts a terrible burden on a family to have to support that many helpless ones with, far too many years before they can contribute to the family. Cherokee men look down on white men, calling them the Unatsila Gitli, the itching dogs, who have no discipline and cannot control their rotten. Men and their women have children in numbers like litters. The Cherokee are totally confused by white people. I tell you, if I couldn't laugh, I couldn't live here amongst some of them. Ardelia finally confides in Lena, who begs her to come see me. Lena can't tell me without Ardelia's permission because I've taught her the midwife's creed of silence. So, it's another month before she can get the fool girl here for me to examine her. And by the time Kitty and Lena get her here, she's 5 months gone. And it's only the stays she wears that have kept her family from finding out. And at 5 months, it's too late for the black drink. The dosage would kill her. So, with Kitty sitting here wailing up a storm, and Lena over there all stony-faced, Ardelia sits here much calmer than I would have thought. So I asked her what's she going to do. And with a sweet smile, she says, Tom will marry me and we'll go away from here to his family place back east. And over her head, Lena catches my eye and shakes her head. Well, rather than poke at that hornet's nest, I asked her about her pregnancy. Have you had the morning sickness? And she looks at me so cow-eyed stupid, I about boxed her ears. She's no idea what I'm talking about. So, no morning sickness, and she craves meat and fried stuff. She's gonna have a boy. So, I tell her some things she needs to know, like no eating strawberries or blueberries so that you don't mark the baby. And no cleaning hares or rabbits so that you don't give that child a split lip. No going to funerals or to the cemetery. And do not name that baby before it's born so that you don't attract the attention of the little people. Well, Ardelia laughs right out loud and wants to know what possible danger a leprechaun could be to her baby. And I told her that the Irish aren't the only folks that know about the little people, and she'd best listen to what I have to say. And why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you don't know about the I'm not just talking about leprechauns. My da was a sailor before he come to this country, and he heard tell a lot of strange stories. He said that every place he went had tales of the little people. Well, every country's got their own, with their own ways and customs. Well, there was that German fella come through here, about a year and a half ago, telling tales of little people called kobolds. Well, and the Northmen have little people called skraelings. Well, I told the girls that the little people of the Cherokee are a race of spirits that live in the rock caves and the mountainsides. Oh, they're very little people, coming only about as tall as your knee, but very well made and handsome. Oh, and with hair so long it brushes the ground. They're very kind-natured and great wonder workers. Oh, and they love music, and so they spend all of their time drumming and dancing and singing. Oh, they have a very gentle nature, but they don't like folk poking about in their business. Which is funny, really, because they like nothing better than to be poking around in ours. Oh, they'll hide your possessions in odd places, and they'll untie your boat and push it out to drift away. But they love a drop of the craven and will do all sorts of favors for a dram of rum or whiskey. Well, I must have a way with the story, because Kitty stopped her sniffling and allowed how she'd heard about the little people. Seems her mum has a silver key that she uses to lock 'em out of the cabin. Now, a silver key is normally for locking out ghosts, but she says that it seems to work well for the spirits, and Lena asked her how she could possibly know such a thing, and Kitty tells her that she's been trying for months to have a dumb supper, and it has never worked. And she finally decided that it was her mom's silver key that was keeping the spirits out. Now, Ardelia had never heard of a dumb supper, so Kitty and Lena are explaining it to her, and a dumb supper. A dumb supper is a divination of sorts. A way for a young girl to learn about the man she's going to marry. You set the table like for a supper, and the phantom of your sweetheart will come and stand behind the chair and leave something in the plate. And whatever he puts in the plate, he'll tell you about his profession. So a horseshoe nail would be a blacksmith, a pile of flour would be a miller, some seeds would be a farmer, and like that there. They said, before your phantom sweetheart arrives, the dogs will be a howling, and the cats will be a yowling, and the cows will be a bawling, and all sort of ruction like that. Oh, it's called a dumb supper because you're not allowed to speak. Not while you're getting ready and not while you're waiting. You set the table just before midnight. Oh, and the girl has to walk backwards to get everything she needs to put on the table until she's got 9 things on the table to eat, like pepper and salt and butter and taters and just 9 things. That's the power number for this spell. Bridie, this is where I blame myself. I should have seen this coming. Lena says Ardelia starts badgering her and Kitty to have a dumb supper. She says that her mom ain't got no silver key and her folks is going to Harleston to hunt for a pair of oxen. I didn't even guess when Lena asked to go stay with her to keep her company, saying that it was scary to be out there all by themselves. The 3 girls was at the house that night, all squirmy and jumping at every noise, but silent as the grave. They got the table set, and they're jammed into the settle, clutching on to each other's hands and waiting to see what would happen. And suddenly, cats started fighting and yowling and the whippoorwills started moaning and crying. Now I asks ya, whippoorwills at midnight? Kitty says the hair on her head stood straight up. Through the open door, the girls could see something coming, floaty-like, coming straight to the house. And them girls sitting there, clutching onto one another, scared to death. But sitting still, just like they's supposed to, not whispering or saying a word. And two hints come straight in the door, neither looking right nor left, and each went up to the table and stood behind one of the chairs. And one of them left a silver coin on the plate that Kitty had laid, and the other left a pewter button on Lena's plate. But there was no phantom standing behind Ardelia's chair, and her plate was empty. And Lena says Ardelia starts moaning and crying, "He didn't go, he didn't go!" And she bolts out the door into the darkness. But Kitty and Lena were too frightened to try to move past the table. And so they sat there clutching onto one another and watched while the ghostly shapes shredded apart and drifted away. Well, the girls knew exactly where she'd gone, and they went straight up to the mill where Tom's apprenticed. But when they got there was too many lights lit for after midnight in Bascom. The miller and his wife was outside. And Mistress Miller saw Kitty and sent her straight back down to the village proper for help. And Bascom was dredging the mill race with a long pole. And when Lena saw this, she turned to Mistress Miller, who told her that Ardelia had come running up and pounding on the door, asking after Tom, and Bascom told her that he'd packed up and left. Leastways, that's what they think, because he was at supper last night, but this morning him and all of his pitiful belongings was gone. And Ardelia never said a word. She just turned away, and before they realized what she was doing, she threw herself into the mill race right at the base of the wheel. Oh, and she knew exactly what she was doing, too. Because the wheel caught her just as she hit the water and pulled her straight down and under. Oh, I don't know what really happened. Lena's never lied to me in her life. She really believes that those phantom sweethearts came to their supper. She even says she knows who it was, but she won't tell me. Oh, as for ghosts and haints, I've seen too many odd things in my life to say that it didn't happen. Lena gave me these. I've never seen the button, but that's nothing. There's lots of buttons in a village. There's even a few coins, but I have to wonder how many pieces of Spanish silver there are hereabouts. As for poor Ardelia, I don't know what to do. Well, she's past our pity and punishment now, but her folks still don't know about Tom and the baby. Oh, her dad's gonna wallow in this. Oh, give him another reason to rant and preach and punish his family. Oh. Well, what does it tell you about a man if his own daughter would kill herself rather than face him with the news of a baby on the way? This is going to kill her mother if he doesn't do it first. Oh, don't you now, Annie, me. He beats them, you know he does, with that wide leather strap of his. Well, I seen it. I was coming home late one night from nursing the Talbot twins through the putrid fever, and I saw him. He had Ardelia's mother kneeling in the muck outside the privy and was cutting the skin off her back and talking the whole time. Horrible, filthy things that no good man would say to his woman. And I ran up to stop him, and he's raving and foaming like a madman and tells me to mind my business, that it's the duty of a Christian man to chastise their family for the sake of their souls. The Bible says so. And he starts reeling verse after verse of scripture, but he's got it all confused and mixed up with all the horrible, filthy things he was saying. Oh, that sick, miserable oh, low dog spalpy. Ashjina gawane God soda aki no. I said I am angry at that bad no man. Well, there's no profanity in the Cherokee language. My dad always said that was a distinct handicap for an Irishman. Oh, I never understood that until just now. Oh, Bridie, my Kushla Daffod. Bridie, would you be knowing if there's any more of this rum hiding out there in the woods? Well, we've just finished off himself secret supply. Well, I'm going to be hard-pressed to explain what happened. Oh, and I'm never going to hear the end of it. Unless we blames it on the little people. Au beau canard, ce bon vignon, roulant ma boulier. Ma beau canard, ce bon vignon, roulant ma boulier. Well, I guess she's been talking to her granda. But Bridie, isn't this a grand notion for Maddie's wedding gift? A housekeeping book of her own, already started with a goodly parcel of receipts. Oh, and these are receipts from some of the best goodwives in the area. Oh, what a grand girl she is, that Lena, and how pleased and proud her cousin will be that she went to all the trouble to Now, I am very surprised that Arpa Samuels was willing to share her receipt for her savory fish timballs. Well, of course I'm keeping at the receipts. Now, there is nothing here that I haven't done trying to make them myself. And mine never taste like hers do. But now that I see the receipt, I'm wondering. She says to use brined fish, but she doesn't say what's in the brine. I'm thinking it's not this receipt at all, but how she pickles the fish that makes them taste the way they do. Oh, she's sly, that girl. Very sly indeed. Oh, of course, I have a housekeeping book. Was a wedding gift from Mr. McFarlane. Yes, he went around and collected receipts from all of his friends and family. Can't you just see it? Himself going to his sisters for their directions on how to brew spruce beer. Well, the Cherokee actually don't write down receipts. They just show you how to make things like, Oshta Diowehi Elisi teaching me how to make bean bread. All right, Bridie, my student. What's Oshta Diowehi Elisi in English? That's right, my grandmother Good Hands. Oh, you're learning fast, girl. Oh, I'll make a Cherokee wife out of you yet. And then I'll marry you off to me brother Stands Alone. Oh, he's a good man, and it would be a good match, both of you being witted and all. And then I'd have you for me sister. The receipt for the bean bread. Oh, you can try to change the subject if you like. But I'm not done with you. I'll get you married off yet. The bean bread, well, it's not really bread the way you're thinking. It's more like dumplings. You know the beans they call the Dutchman's breeches? You boil up a double handful of the dried beans and then mash them. You add a handful of corn flour, a little grease, and an egg, and then you mix it real well because it's going to be stiff. Then you take a spoonful of the dough and put it in a green corn husk and then wrap it up and tie it. When you've got all the dough wrapped up, you take all the little bundles and drop them in boiling water. And then you let them simmer till they float. Then you just turn them out and unwrap them. They taste best hot, but they keep well overnight and I often serve them cold for breakfast. Mr. McFarlane didn't like them much at first, but he's learned. This book was a gift for himself. When Daffod and I got married, the only cooking I knew was Cherokee. My dad had lived with the clan so long he'd lost his taste for white man's cooking, except for porridge, which he said he missed something dreadful. I've learned to fix the things that himself likes, but I'm no grand hand as a cook. Which reminds me, Bridie, I've a favor to beg of you. Would you please teach Lena how to bake proper? Well, she's 16 years old and a woman. She was raised Cherokee because that was my daughter's wish, but now she's to learn on me because she wants to learn to be a midwife. And I think she wants to learn a bit about her white family. Oh, of course, it makes me very happy, and I've much to teach her. But I'm not good at everything, and I'm going to need help to educate the girl. Oh, thank you, Bridie. You're the best cook in the area, and you won't fill her head with nonsense. Oh, well, I'm a little worried about what else she's learning. You know, you learn how to do things, but then you learn how to think about things, and... All right. Truth be told, I'm a little fashed about her friendship with Mrs. Biederman. I don't like the way she hangs about and curries favor with the woman. Well, just because she's the new preacher's wife doesn't mean that she's any better than any other woman. I know, it's just her pretty ways and her grand library that have caught Lena's attention, and she doesn't mean any harm, but... Oh, ye gods, Bridie, Lena's a more accomplished woman right now than Mrs. Biederman. If it wasn't for her husband, her housekeeper, and her cook, she couldn't survive out here. And I told Lena that too. I told her that Mrs. Biederman's book learning never taught her how to skin out a deer, tan its hide, and make shoes for her family. Her library never showed her where to find the hips and haws to make a cordial to nurse her family through the lung fever. And her fancy Bible never showed her how to cash pemmican, squash, and corn to keep her family from starving during a long winter. And yet, I hear her telling that I'm no kind of a cook because I cook Indian food. You know that fancy oxtail broth she takes around to all the sick folk? Well, it's made by Gussie, her cook. Wilhelmina Biederman's never lifted a finger in her own kitchen except to snap it to get Gussie's attention. And I think it is just shameful the way she passes that officer up. I'll calm down. Oh, yes. You might say that Mrs. Biederman and I had a falling out. Oh, of course I'll tell you. There's no reason you shouldn't know. Well, shortly after they arrived in Walton's Ferry, Mrs. Biederman come to tea. I no sooner had her settled with a cup than she says that she heard that I was half Cherokee and wanted to know if it was true. And I allowed that it was. And then she wanted to know if I'd been baptized. And I told her no. Then she said, well, then you couldn't have been married in the church. And I agreed that we were not. I told her we were married at the Longhouse in a Cherokee family. So then she says, then I assume that your children were not baptized either. And when I agreed they were not, she muttered something about doing the Lord's work in the savage fields. I did not say a word, not one word. Well, then she asked me about the political allegiances in the area. I told her that I couldn't speak for everyone, but my Mr. McFarlane, being a Scot, will have naught to do with the English. He says if the whole bloody island were to burst into flames, he wouldn't piss on it to put it out. And they've not proved to be good friends to the Cherokee either. So, although we've tried very hard to remain neutral, if pushed, we will side with the French. Les Français sont des frères aux Cherokee. The French are brothers to the Cherokee. Well, they came to us with respect. They traded with us. They took part in our ceremonies. They married in and became family. She looked at me like the dog had spoken to her. I said, oui, je parle français. Yes, I speak French. I'm a trader's daughter. I speak English, French, Cherokee, Abenaki, sign talk, sign lingo. Parlez-vous français, do you? She nodded her head but looked real put out. I guess I upset her view of uneducated savages. So we sat, sipping our tea quietly, eyeing each other for a bit. And then she said that her husband had heard a terrible story about a raid on Walton's Ferry. And would I be good enough to tell her the truth of it? And I thought to myself, well, now here's the truth of this visit. The rumors and all finally got to her so bad that she had to come and find out what really happened. So I told her. I told her 2 summers ago, everyone who come through the area had tales to tell of Tory raiders and their Indian allies looting and burning their way across the land of the Middle Waters. And I told her that the trouble started on a Sunday. Everyone in the area had come to Walton's Ferry for a church service. Mr. Trueblood, that nice Quaker minister, had finally made the trek all the way out here to the ends of the earth. There was going to be a party after the service. The Waltons' first grandbaby was going to be christened. And, the Doyles were finally going to have their country marriage made proper in front of a minister. Everyone was so excited to have company again after being cabin-bound all winter. So we was cleaning up after supper, and the Doyle's 2 boys come running in, hooting and hollering about riders coming. So we went out onto the porch just in time to see Captain Parker and that Iowa scout 3 Crows come riding into the yard. Captain Parker had come to collect our men. The militia was being called up. Seems there'd been a terrible raid on Fort Osage, and the militia was being sent out to ride down the raiders. Well, you can imagine the reaction hearing that the men were going to be gone when there was raiders about. And it was decided that Walton's Ferry was the safer place to be, so I offered to watch all the children while everyone went home to get weapons and food and other needments. And when all the confusion was died down, the tavern, being the largest building and the easiest blockaded, became the new home for 8 women, 17 children, 2 pistols, and old Gus Emerson and his 3 dogs. The men rode off, swearing up and down that there were no worries. No party of raiders would hang about after torching a fort, and they'd never come this far out into the wilderness. Never say never. Old Gus went up the path with his 3 dogs to stand guard. And about dusk on the 3rd day, we heard a dog barking and then yelping, and I went back out onto the porch just in time to see that old spotty dog of Gus's come limping into the yard with an arrow in its butt. And 3 men, sack from the looks of their paint, come into the yard following the dog. And one of them had Gus's hat and gun and powder horn, and I bolted for the door and slammed it shut. We barricaded the shutters and the door as best we could, loaded the pistols, and prayed. There was a noise up on the roof, and it seemed that one of the men had climbed up there, and I peeked out the shutters real carefully, and there were 3 men out front, so we had maybe 4 to deal with. But then Faith Robison came in from the back and said that there was 2 more out back in the smokehouse, so that meant we had 6 raiders to deal with. And then all of a sudden we heard an odd noise from the fire. And I turned around just in time to see a sock fall into the fire. And all the smoke started to back into the room. They had taken our clean laundry off the bushes and the fence and were using it to block up the chimney to try to smoke us out. Well, Deborah Marston took and shooed all the children behind the bar and down into the root cellar, so, well, they'd be safe from the smoke for a little while at least. And then Susanna Walton saw a shape move past one of the shutters, and she grabbed one of the pistols and fired. But she might as well have been shooting at the moon for all the hope she had of hitting anything. All she did was let them know that we had a gun. Luckily, Di Walton can't thatch a roof to save his soul. The man on the roof was walking down the ridge line, and he put his foot on a bad patch and broke through. And so there he is, stuck, with his leg trapped between the roof ridge and the thatch. And Martha Doyle took the other pistol and put a shot into the roof, right above where that leg was dangling. And the leg stopped moving. And suddenly there was a horrible banging on the door, and a splinter and crack, and a chunk of the door broke off. And then 2 more whacks, and you could see the edge of a tomahawk slit in between 2 boards of the door. Well, the latch string was on the inside, and the only way to get the door open would be to cut a hole in the door. And 2 more whacks, and the top plank of the door tears off and leaves a hole big enough for a hand and an arm to reach in and start scrabbling around for the latch. And when I saw that, it was like all the smoke and the noise and the crying just went away. And there was a calm, clear place in my head. And without a second thought, I walked and picked up the axe from the wood pile and walked up to the door and hacked that arm off right below the elbow. And it made a horrible bloody mess in the apron as it fell to the floor at my feet. And I just stood there looking at it for the longest time. And gradually I became aware of this horrible shrieking noise coming from the other side of the door, and it got louder and louder, and gradually all the smoke and the crying come back, and I wiped my eyes clear, and I looked up, and there was a warrior's face peering through the hole in the door, and Carl Doyle took the pistol he was reloading for his man and fired it point blank into the face. And the recoil knocked him down, and he stayed where he sat with blood running down his chin where he bit through his lower lip. He's 13 years old and he just killed a man. It got very quiet outside, but we stayed where we were, afraid to open the door for fear of a trap. And we sat that way all night. We might still be sitting there, but we heard voices calling and horses coming up the river path. Our men were home, and we all poured out the door crying and talking, and Captain Parker sent all the younger children off with the older girls and let the rest of us tell our tale. As the men pulled the body off the roof, 3 crows come into the yard carrying a body missing a right arm. He'd followed a blood trail through the brush down to the river. As the bodies of the 3 men lay in the yard, 3 crows went around and took the scalps. He was very impressed that 2 women and a young boy were able to kill an enemy apiece. He offered us the scalps of the men that we'd killed, and he was very surprised when Carl and Martha refused. The British are offering £10 apiece for Indian scalps. He was delighted when they told him, oh, do what he wanted, just get rid of them. When he offered me the scalp of the man I killed, I took it. Mrs. Biederman choked on her tea. And you can imagine the look she gave me. Oh, big eyes and tight lips. I told her that my people had never taken scalps until the British introduced the practice to this country. When you put a price on folks' heads, you need a quick and easy way to tally the dead. A scalp is small and doesn't take much room. They thread them on lines like fish and then send them back to Fat George as trophies of his war in the New World. Mrs. Biederman pressed her hanky to her lips, muttered something I did not understand, and bolted out the door. I haven't seen her since. I suppose I should feel badly for upsetting her, but I don't. She'd say I wasn't a good Christian, and she'd be right. But then I never claimed to be. She's figured that out, I guess. Emma, the Hanson's youngest, asked me one time why folks call me an Indian when I look like a white woman. Well, she wanted to know if it was just a matter of choice. Because if it was, she wanted to be Cherokee too. Well, it seems to her that when my granddaughters go stay with me mother's people, they have grand adventures. And they don't have to card and spin wool, which Emma thinks is dreadful boring. I had to allow it was a fair question. Oh, I've thought long on this, how I see myself. Well, I was raised Cherokee, but with a broad dash of me dad's Irish for seasoning. I married a white man, but we made our lives on the frontier where, oh, folks didn't care so much about your race or your station in life as long as you was a good neighbor. but that was then. And even though I've delivered most of the babies in this civilized community that's grown up around us, the Mrs. Biedermans of the world have made it very clear that to them I will always be métis, a half-breed. I'm not such a fool as to be upset by that. But, when I was young, it was a thing of much amazement to be taken for a white woman. And I thought that the goods and the lifestyle of the whites would be a better life for my family. So when Duffet and I got married, I tried very hard to be a white good wife. Fortunately, that nonsense soon went out with the wash water. Lately, I've come to realize that when I speak of my people, I'm talking about the Cherokee. And I know now what I should have told Emma. And what I need to tell Lena. And maybe Mrs. Biederman. I took that scalp and I stretched it on a willow hoop frame. And I beaded the edges to make a trophy worthy of a respected enemy. And I took it home to my people, and I presented it to the clan mothers to bring honor to the women in my family, and to remind my family that although I live with one foot in the white world and one in the Cherokee, I am still a daughter of their lodge. And when my time comes, I'll go home to my mother's lodge to die where I was born. And my children will tell my grandchildren the stories of my life. They'll tell them about all the babies I delivered and all the herbs I made into medicines to fight the white man's sickness. They'll show them the scalp of the man that I killed, protecting other women's children. And this will be a better thing to leave them than a book of receipts. Hey,